Um, we have Father Michael Shanbour with us. He was, of course, joined with Kerygma with Father Patrick Kinder of blessed memory, and of course, His Grace Bishop Anthony Michaels. So we're excited to have Father Michael with us. Father, I don't even know exactly what years you were here, so please tell us and take it away.
Okay. I was at camp from 1981 to basically 85. I wasn't there the whole summer in 85, but and I was a counselor, and then in 1984 I was the evening program director, and Father Don was the head male counselor. So, and Anthony Drake was probably, were you in the kitchen?
May bring additional showers on Wednesday, but that could.
Which summer? 80, which one?
Oh, I don't know, 81 to 84.
Oh, mixed, yeah. Sometimes kitchen, sometimes counselor.
Okay. And of course, the village was instrumental in my spiritual development. It still needs to be developed a lot, but and also instrumental in my becoming a priest. It's the first time that I actually, thought realistically that that might be something that I would desire with God's will. So I guess I want to share, I don't want it to be a downer or anything, but, I'm known for singing and everything, but maybe you've heard through the grapevine, but I have a vocal disease that in the last 25 years, it's been progressing. So you might hear it in my voice. And I can't sing worth a darn. So don't ask me to get the guitar out and sing. It's been I don't know, a huge cross. And there's been times that I've cried at the altar. So it's actually in my head. It's neurological. And the brain tells my vocal cords to dance around when they're not supposed to. So anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest because I've actually avoided some alumni gatherings because I'm kind of embarrassed about my voice. So forgive me, and that's all I'll say about it. But later, if you have a question, you're welcome to ask. So, I haven't been on one of these Zoom gatherings, so I'm not exactly sure what the speaker typically talks about and how serious the topics are. So I don't want to get too serious, but I guess I entitled my talk, "What I Wish I Would Have Known at Camp," which, could fill a whole notebook. But spiritually speaking, the first thing that came to mind is that one of Father John Namie's most frequent sayings completely went over my head. So when Father John would say, "You can't learn to love unless you have obedience." Do you remember that one? I had no idea. What is he talking about? What is this obedience thing? And what's it have to do with love? But over time, God willing, I'm still learning, but over time it finally clicked a little bit. And of course, the Lord himself pretty much said this, because he said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. In other words, if you love me, you will obey me. And it just didn't click with me back at the village. I wish Father John would have elaborated, or I wish I would have asked him to elaborate. But now I realize that if we cannot subject our will to someone else, if we can't be obedient to someone else, then we won't have any humility, of course, but also we won't be able to love. And ultimately, if we don't learn obedience, we can never be obedient to God. And so that's the goal. But we have to be obedient. We have to learn obedience in the context of our life. So like our married life, I'm sure that Father Don is obedient to Hyria, Janet, for instance, all the time, right? So, but seriously, to have a strong will, to have an arrogant will, to have a prideful will, that's a disease. That's a disorder. It's a spiritual disorder. And I just never made the connection back. Well, I was 18 years old when I first arrived at the village. And so that's something that I wish I would have known, because I think it would have helped me. I don't think I was terribly disobedient back then, but it did come later. And I needed to learn about obedience. So that's one thing. Another thing that I wish I would have known at camp is, I guess I'll put it this way, how important it is to simply practice following the commandments of Christ. I think that, I wanted to kind of be up here with some kind of lofty theological concepts and ideas, but the Orthodox life, the real Orthodox life, is, again, obedience to Jesus's commandments. And it's very practical. It's like so down to earth. The Lord says, love your enemies, pray for those who abuse you, forgive those who are unkind to you, and so forth. So those are, if we don't learn to practice the Lord's commandments, we're never going to step or grow spiritually. And just to tie into that, I wish I would have known about how the fathers talk about the stages of the spiritual life. So purification, illumination, and deification. And most of us are just trying to be in this stage of purification, to purify the heart from any passions, from any sinful inclinations, from sinful thoughts, and so forth. But I like the purification, illumination, and deification because it gives you a kind of a map or a direction of how we live the spiritual life. We're not going to achieve illumination without first being purified. So that's why Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. They shall see God. They shall experience God. So we really have to purify our heart from anything that is an obstacle to love of God and love of neighbor. And so speaking about jumping, trying to have some kind of spiritual experience before you have this foundation. One of my favorite stories of Saint Paisios is about 3 young men who came to see him. They were probably teenagers or young adults, and they weren't really believers. They were skeptics, but they had heard that Saint Paisios was a miracle worker. And so they said, let's go see this miracle worker. Let's go see if this is true. So they come to St. Paisios and they stand in front of him and they say, show us a miracle. We've heard that you work miracles. We want to see a miracle. And so St. Paisios, he said, just hold on a minute. And he went into another room and the boys heard a bunch of metal clinking and, a bunch of sounds as if somebody was opening and closing drawers and things like that. When St. Paisios came back, he had a big machete, a big knife, and he said, okay, you want a miracle? This is going to be my miracle. I'm going to cut your heads off and then reattach them. And the boys were like, no, Father, another miracle, a different miracle, please. It's one of my favorites. He had a really good sense of humor and a really good way of teaching people what they needed to know. But, my point is that those 3 guys, they were looking for deification. They were looking, they had no desire to do the work, the spiritual work that's required to purify the heart. So they were just looking for some kind of spiritual magician, magic. But this teaching of purification, or sometimes it's called praxis, which, as it sounds like in Greek, it means practice. And that's what we're supposed to do if we're a disciple of Christ, supposed to practice his commandments. But purification, illumination, and deification somehow opened something really important to me, so that I could understand what I need to do in the spiritual life. So just to give you an idea, illumination illumination is basically to have unceasing prayer and to be dispassionate, not to be led by the passions. So Adam was created, the fathers say, in the condition of illumination. So some of the indications that we see of that proves this is, of course, the fact that Adam walked with God, but also when God brought the animals to him, he knew their names. In other words, he knew their essence, the essence of what God had created. He didn't name them hippopotamus and elephant and so forth. He knew their very essence. He was able to discern, and so he used his discernment to be able to name them exactly as God created them. Another clue is when God put Adam to sleep, so Adam was unconscious, and the Lord created Eve from Adam's rib. Well, when Adam woke up, he immediately knew who this Eve was. He said, "This is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." So, in other words, he had the gift of prophecy. He was a prophet because he was in the stage, this condition, spiritual condition of illumination. And Adam was supposed to grow, Adam and Eve, into deification. That was what they were supposed to do in paradise. I don't want to go on too long. And I've already preached one pretty long sermon today. I'll just mention real quick that one of the other things that I wish I had known at camp was that we had so many saints that were living, many of them were living when I was at the Antiochian Village. St. Paisios was alive on this earth. St. Porphyrios was with us. And I don't know, I didn't have a clue. Part of it was that we didn't have a lot of books in English, but I didn't know anybody who knew these people or knew of them, except the former Rick Michaels. He used to talk about Archbishop John in San Francisco. And of course, he had already reposed, but he talked about him like a saint. And of course, now he's canonized. But I just didn't know what to do with it at the time. Maybe I was kind of a little bit scared because he was in ROCOR, and I got the feeling at that time that ROCOR was bad. Anyway, so since camp, and to be honest, I didn't even learn most of this stuff in seminary. It was after seminary. But St. John Maximovich, St. Luke the surgeon, died in 1980s, I believe. St. Leonid of Optina, Mother Gavrilia, who was kind of like Mother Teresa on steroids. Father Arseni, that's not his real name, but that's what the book's called. Grand Duchess Elizabeth, St. Joseph the Hesychist, St. Nectarios, Elder Thaddeus, of course, St. Herman of Alaska, Father George Calciu, St. Seraphim of Seraph, who's not terribly contemporary, but there wasn't that much information about him when I was at camp. And so there's many, many more. These different elders and eldresses that reached the height of holiness. And to read about them is to begin to kind of grasp in a practical way, you know, what we need, what can we do to really grow in God's grace. So Elder Ephraim of Katunakia is another one. There's a book on him called Obedience is Life, which is one that I needed to read back then, right? Obedience is life. It's wonderful. So I just hope that maybe you already know all this stuff, but it's good to be reminded. And forgive me if I preached too much or too intensely. But I'm going to also do a little advertisement. Do you guys know about this book? It's a children's catechism. It's called The Good Samaritan. So I wrote this book for children about ages 6 to 12. And it has like 13 chapters, and they all kind of follow the theme of the Good Samaritan as it is interpreted by St. John Chrysostom and St. Ambrose and others. And then I use that theme to teach about paradise. What was paradise? The fall of Adam and Eve. It's called Adam and Eve in Time Out. The sickness of sin. Jesus Christ, God's medicine. The church. Holy tradition, the priesthood, Holy Communion, Holy Baptism, repentance and confession. And then the last 3 chapters are prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So a little advertisement, and it's beautifully illustrated. This is the sickness of sin. So we've sold about 13 or 1400. I self-published it, so Ancient Faith does have it, but it would be better to buy it from our website because all the money goes to the church and we get a lot more money that way. The website is WEN, as in Wenatchee, WENorthodox.com. And then you go to the store and it's on there. So I guess that's about it. But I also wrote this book, Know the Faith. That's for adults. It's kind of an explanation of the Orthodox faith with a little bit of comparison with Roman Catholic and Protestantism. That's from Ancient Faith. Okay. No more advertisements.